Welcome back, everybody. It's another episode of The Human Side of Marketing. I'm your co-host, Chris Angel, and I'm with your host, as always, Chris Stockwell.
Chris, how's it going?
Good, man. What is up? It's we're in the middle of summer when we're recording this, and it feels good.
It is June.
Yeah.
And I just got my COVID haircut. I literally haven't had a haircut in since the end of March, and is I think last week of June. Last week of June right now. But I typically keep my hair very cropped close, and it was driving me nuts to have my hair grown out for 3 months. So it was a big day yesterday. I got my hair cut.
I really hear that. I really hear that, Kurt. And I want to understand more about, like, what is it like for you when you let your hair grow?
You want to understand.
I really want to understand what it's like what it's like for you in a day in the life of Kurt with long hair.
I feel like you're segueing into our topic.
Well, I was trying to find some segue, but that is my segue, by the way, because we're talking about listening, and not just listening to listen, right? Because there's a lot of kinds of listening, but listening to understand versus listening to reply. So unpack that for me a little bit in the beginning, like the listening to reply, like how is that different than listening to understand?
Yeah. So there's a lot of, very tenuous and sensitive subjects happening right now in our world.
Yeah.
And we're not going to get into those in this podcast, but I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were talking about it, and he said, I think people just need to listen to each other more. And he's a friend of mine who is very close to the racial topic that's going on right now. He's a white man married to a black woman. And I just wanted to get his perspective on things. And so, like I said, we're not going to get into the whole racial topic of what is going on right now, but he basically said, we need to do better at listening to each other. And he said, he didn't say this quote, but it made me think of the quote from Stephen R. Covey. Most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And I think that is what's happening right now in our culture is we have too many people, quote unquote, listening, but they're not really listening. Right. Or they're listening to waiting for a pause so they can tell the person that they're, really kind of almost debating with, like, what they think about it. Right. Yeah. And so, and like I said, I promised we weren't going to get into the topic of the day necessarily, but that translates very well into business.
I think so. I think if we keep it on the human side for a minute, there's a requirement for curiosity to listen without any response. Like if you could just listen, I think what typically happens and what I've noticed in Facebook land with the current events is that somebody will say something and people aren't asking an additional question or second question, third question, fourth question. They're not trying to dig deeper to understand. It's just trigger. So I say something, and if you can't, if you don't agree with it, then there's a reaction to it. So you can see this, like where you're going to go with this in the space of marketing. We in marketing are broadcasting a message all the time, but that message would be so much more powerful if we could spend time listening to people rather than saying, well, I built a product. I don't have time to listen for what they want. I already built this thing. I've invested money. There's sunken costs. Like, this has to go to market. And then we're going to market it in a way that we have to. And I think sometimes people will go even further and they'll invest in language patterns, NLP. They'll try all kinds of things to force the thing through because they've already sunken all kinds of money into the thing they built rather than listening to begin with.
Yeah. I've heard somebody say it this way, that they're a slave to the idea or they're a slave to the product.
Yeah.
And, when the individual that I was listening to that was talking about that, it made so much sense because you're so right. When we're so close to our product or our service and we're so invested in what we do on a daily basis, we want people to reciprocate the excitement that we have about it, but we're so knowledgeable about the thing, or we've spent so much invested our personal life into this thing that they're not at the same place we are in understanding it. And even worse, like you said, trying to force something on someone who doesn't understand, the problem that it solves. So when we say that, you're like a slave to the idea, or you're a slave to the product, rather than bringing a product to a market that has a desire for a solution, you're bringing your product to the market saying, I've got this thing that you need, whether you realize it or not. And going back to some of the topics in the news, or some of the hot buttons right now, when people feel so energized and convicted about what they're thinking is right, they're trying to shove that into the conversation without ever getting an understanding of where the person they're talking to is on their journey of, their understanding of what's going on. We all come from different perspectives. And so, like you said, that's a great point and related to marketing.
You can see it with the current events where, for example, policy, people are trying to push policy. I might even say it too soon. We don't make this a political conversation, but like if what there is to do is listen to understand, that requires a conversation. And there's this, marketing to one customer versus trying to create policy for a nation. It takes even more time, and I'm not even sure how that's going to happen. Right. But where I've kind of brought myself is like, the best I can do is I can listen. I can listen to, whether it's about current events or about marketing, I can listen to understand.
Yeah.
I can't control anybody else, but if I can continue to sharpen my skills of listening to understand, that creates a ripple effect with you. So if I'm listening to you to understand, that all of a sudden you feel heard. That's the cool part about this. Like when you listen to understand, you actually feel understood and seen and gotten. So now you pass it on to somebody else,
Yeah. And I think that when we as business owners can really understand the power of listening to understand, or understand the power of presenting our product or service to somebody who needs to be on a journey to understand what this thing is and how it fits into their life. Right. And a lot of the elements that we talk about are based upon the story brand model of identifying who your customer is, and then understanding the problem that you solve, and ultimately understanding how the problem that you solve makes them feel when that problem is solved, or when that problem's not solved, how it makes them feel. Right. Then you're right. That's the key, man. When somebody says, they understand me. And in politics aside, and going into marketing and products and services, when you can be the business that this word on the street is, they really understand where I'm coming from. Yep. Man, that is some powerful marketing. And that's marketing you don't have to pay for. That's free marketing. That's called word of mouth. Yeah. Right. And that's really where that starts to get some traction, is in a world where it doesn't seem like anybody's listening to anybody. This guy or gal gets me, and it's a purse, or it's lawn care, or it's plumbing services, or it's financial planning, whatever. People are just looking for stability and stable ground, especially right now. Dude, and you get there by listening.
So good. I'm in the middle of remodeling my backyard. We haven't broken ground or anything, but I'm waist deep in Pinterest boards, and I've got like all of these ideas, right? And we're having somebody come out on Monday to consult with us about all these ideas. And my biggest concern is that she won't listen, or that she won't keep asking more and more questions, because I've put a ton of time and thought into this, and I don't know how to organize it. So if you think about you as the business going to meet with your potential customer or client, they've thought a ton about what it is they want. They're waist deep in Pinterest boards or vision boards or ideas, goals, whatever. And there's a ton of time invested and emotion invested in wanting this to be perfect. I want my backyard to be amazing. And what I don't want to do is to sink a ton of money into it and have it not. And the only way that vision gets accomplished is if she comes in and understands the world of what I can't put words to.
Right. Right. Exactly.
Because I can't put words to it. I don't know. I'm at a loss. I'm like, I don't know how to communicate this to you. That's why I think it's so important for us as business people to get really good at asking questions and then just sitting in their answers and then asking more questions and sitting it. The first thing out of their mouth is not what you build your proposal around.
Right.
It takes so many more layers to get underneath all that.
Right. Right. Yeah. And, it's when we, it's been a journey for us, but when we, over the last few years anyway, have been better at asking questions like, so tell me about what you do, right. Tell me about your customer. So when you do this for them, how does it make them feel? Right. When I start asking questions like that, it's amazing. People kind of perk up. They're like, oh,
yeah.
Well, and it's funny. Sometimes I'm talking to somebody and they're like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll say, well, what do people say when they're excited about what you've done for them? What do they say? Oh, they say this, 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 and this. And I'm like, that's how they feel.
Nice. Yeah.
You had that, and some people are very connected to it. We were working with a company in town that does flooring, and they're a family-based company and very connected to the idea of it being a pleasant experience. And they were very connected to the idea of, when we walk away, we want people to feel this. And it was very evident that they were very in tune with what they wanted their customers to feel when they walked away from a job, because every one of their employees was saying the same thing when I was talking to them at different times. That's when you have a culture that gets it, not a culture that can crank out a widget on time and on budget.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. But I think that you go to a better place as a business owner, as a leader, when your staff can say, we do this because it makes people feel this, or we do this because I know that I'm making a difference in somebody's life in this way or that way. Yeah. Right. And that gives them a reason to get out of bed rather than just cranking out a widget or, shoving papers around or, filing documents and, whatever.
You say that, it makes me think of like when you listen to understand, you get a clear picture of why this is important to your people.
Yeah.
And then you get to convey that back to your team, like that your team would show up and realize, like, I'm not just making widgets. The only way your team member knows that it's not just about widgets is because you listened deep enough to get what it was really about for your people.
Right.
You can't do that if you just listen to respond, or you have your response ready before their last word comes out of their mouth.
Right. Or you're walking into, like in your scenario, you're walking into, she's walking into your backyard and she doesn't know if you're just a dude that said, I just hate walking out in my deck and seeing, these weeds, just fix it. Or you're a guy that spent 30 hours on Pinterest, probably more. 30 hours on Pinterest, and you've got a very, not a clear understanding, because that's what you're saying. You're in a fog.
Yeah.
But you want somebody to say, I respect the time that you've invested because this is very personal to you.
Yeah.
And tell me the things that you like, what you don't like, why you don't like them, what do you like about this, or when you see that, what does that make you feel?
Yeah.
And I'd be curious to know how this meeting goes. Because if there's something that you saw in that Pinterest board and you're like, man, that reminds me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I would go down to the creek and there was this one bush that would just kind of blow in the wind. And it was just, I just remember the sound and the water. And, so if she says that and you say your story about being a kid and that memory, and she's like, we're going to make that memory happen for you. Dude, you're hiring her. Right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is I won't know until we have the conversation, what it is I'm trying to say. And my biggest fear is that she won't ask me enough questions to get the world of it,
Yeah. Well, you'll have to circle back and maybe we'll have to do an adjunct to this podcast and go, Chris, how'd it go? Did you?
Yeah. Right. Like what were the lessons learned? Let's do a podcast episode on the lessons learned. Well, so question for you then, when you think about listening to understand, you've been talking about some of the refinements you've made in your own process. Like, what do you think give me a couple applicable principles here. Like, how do we do that?
So I wanted to give a personal example of something that just happened to us. We just landed the largest contract we've ever had in the last 9 years of Well-Dressed Walrus. It's actually our birthday yesterday.
Hey,
9 years. We're 9 years old. The walrus is 9 years old.
That's awesome.
We landed our biggest contract. And it's funny because we've been blessed to be really busy. And when the lead came to me, they said, we've got this deal. We got, we're this big kind of, it's like a company buying other companies and they're bringing them all together in this kind of conglomerate thing.
Yeah.
And they're like, we are worried that, that they actually didn't say we're worried that, this and this is not going to happen. But I could kind of hear that as I was listening to them, to the gal who's kind of representing the entity that's buying all these businesses,
right?
And trying to bring them under one umbrella. And we want to work with a company who, understands web, understands this, understands messaging, yada, yada, yada. And so they said, we want you to put a pitch deck together and present to myself and like 12 other people on like Tuesday. And this was like Wednesday. So I had like less than a week. And I'm thinking, man, I'm so busy. I don't have a pitch deck ready for this.
Right.
And, I thought, you know what? I'm just going to talk about how we listen, how we do our process to make their life easier to get this done. So one thing that I told them is, there's probably better designers than us. There's probably better copywriters than us. There's probably better web developers than us, but I'll put our process up against anybody to make your large project go smoothly so that everybody knows what's going on at all times through the project and there's nothing gets missed. Nothing is a surprise at the end. When we deliver your product, it's exactly as you expected it to be. And one of the things that I told them, one of the things that we do that 9 years ago we established is we want to be the Nordstrom of communication, not the Walmart of communication, which is like most businesses or most web developers, especially. Everybody's got horror stories. And so literally, I started out the pitch deck and I said, doing a project like this sucks. That was my opening nice. Slide.
You hooked me. I'm in.
Yeah.
Yes, you got me.
And it sucks because communication breakdown happens, but it doesn't. Communication breakdown is typically what happens, but it doesn't have to be that way. And that was my first slide. And then I said, this is how we do it. We communicate every week. We've got a process that you don't have to learn any special software to go through an approval process. We've got a project management tool that we use. We've got this, we've got this, we got da 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 da. So you have the peace of mind that your project is going to be on time, on budget, and what you expected it to be. And that was it. That's really all I said. I didn't even go into the details of how we do it. Right. I didn't bore them with stuff about WordPress and cascading style sheets and FTP access and, all that stuff. And, I wrapped it up with, and we also host websites. And so, for the life of the website, the guys who are fixing it or updating it are the guys that built it. So, you'll know that it's in good hands. Yeah. And the gal that she got back to me, a week or so later and said, hey, we're narrowing it down to a couple people, but you're way in the lead. And she said, in the 15 years of doing this, that was the best pitch I've ever heard. Nice. And I was like, really? Yeah. It's that easy? Right. It's that easy to be the best?
That's the lesson, dude. That's the principle.
It is that easy, Chris. Listen.
That's it.
Because for the last 9 years, we've been listening to our customers and saying, we've been guilty of doing things wrong. And so when we are guilty of doing things wrong and not communicating correctly, it's because we're not listening, or delivered something that was not correct. It's because we didn't listen. Right. I've got a business coach that we had for a lot of years, and he would say, communication is the response you get. So when somebody's communicating back to you frustration, or they're communicating back to you that, this or that, didn't go right, it's probably because you didn't do something on the front end of communicating what you were working on for them. And it's somewhere it went south. Not all the time, but most of the time. Yeah. Not everybody's cool to work with, but the majority of people out there are cool to work with. And when things go wrong, it's usually perceived indifference, or two, you didn't take the time to understand. So that's what we've been trying to do for 9 years.
Yeah.
And it just landed us the biggest job we've ever had, because we just gave them the peace of mind that, hey, we're going to listen to you and deliver what you want.
You know how everybody wants a hack, and we always say like, oh, there's no magic bullet that, you know, like, when you listen this way to understand and you really get people, like in some ways it is a shortcut. It is a hack. It is a magic bullet. Like,
it is a magic. That's a great point. Maybe that's the title.
The magic bullet.
Listening is the magic bullet.
Nice.
The magic hack. Listen.
Yeah, I know, right? But it's so funny because we tend to think of all these other things, but there's this interpersonal. That's why, again, the human side of marketing as a name for this show is such a perfect reflection of what is required. Like, if you don't want to do it the way that everybody else does it, like, your advantage is to make it human. But to make it human, you got to listen.
Yeah.
That's what makes it human. That's the hack.
Yeah. And you have to set your pride aside.
Right.
You have to set your agenda aside. I think another thing too is we get into like a scenario of like a sales scenario, like the gal that's coming out to your house to talk about your landscaping. If she's got an agenda for you before she's talked to you, she's probably going to lose the sale.
Ooh, that's good. And I've been around the block long enough. This is the thing about when you've been sold to a lot, and the world has been broadcasting and selling. So we've all experienced being sold to a lot. If I smell it, I'll shut down. I'll be like, this isn't it.
Yep.
This isn't it. I'll know. I won't. I'll just know. I'll feel it. I'll be like, this isn't the right fit.
Yep. And everybody can feel that icky feeling. Everybody knows it. Maybe they don't necessarily know how to identify it, but and that's typically what's happening is the individual is doing the sell rather than the listen, I guess. You
remember Seth Godin's quote, find products for your people.
Yep.
Not people for your products. And I think that's one of the things we've talked about here. It's like, if you go into this saying, I've got a thing and I keep waiting to tell you about my thing and I never really get where you are.
Yep.
It's going to backfire. But if you go in saying, I understand my people, because I spend a lot of time listening to understand my people. Yes. So I know when I bring this product or service to my people, it's the right fit because I've been listening for years.
Yeah. Yeah. I heard another quote that every business needs to be ready to shift because shift happens. And, especially right now, it's, we talked about it a couple episodes ago with the whole quarantine and how you need to be able to, modify how you talk about your product. But, that even in an industry where you've kind of been a standard, there's probably an element of shifting to a new way of delivering your product because the marketplace is saying, please change because this is broken. And your competitors are not shifting or changing because they're stuck in this mindset of this is the way we do it.
Right.
And if you don't accept the reality that shift happens and you can't shift, then you're going to be one of those casualties.
Yeah. Yep. We're seeing a lot of that right now. And I think when you get into current events like we have, because we've had a number of them in this year.
Yeah. Is 2020 it's still 2020, right?
It's still 2020. Yeah. Right. When you have that type of circumstance piled on top of what's our normal routine of life, it makes it even more important for you to shift because without that stimulus, what'll happen is we sometimes will just put up with being sold to. We're like, it is par for the course. Nobody ever listens and you don't listen either. So I guess I like your proposal better than everybody else's proposal, but none of you really listen to me. So I pick you.
Right.
But now, because our emotions are so heightened, we're just like, no, and no, and no. And I will wait, or I will kill this project before I hire anybody because we're just fed up with all of it.
People not listening. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Totally. Yeah.
Yep.
This is a good episode, man. This is deep.
Yeah, I like
I
it.
like it. I like that we can play kind of dance in both sections of current events and how this applies to marketing, because it does apply to both. That's the humanness of it all.
Yeah. And I think that's the big takeaway is with current events being so contentious right now,
Yeah.
everybody
Mm-hmm.
has been affected by what's going on.
Yeah.
And everybody's tired. Everybody feels a little thin. Yeah. And when you can come in and make something simple because you say, tell me what you're looking for.
Right.
How would it make you feel if we did it the way that you're asking for it to be done? Right. You know, what do I need to know about making this process easy for you? You meant you're gonna crush the competition.
It's huge. Yeah. Yep. So good. Thanks for always bringing relevant humanness to business and marketing, you know, things that don't typically feel human. Like, I think those of us that are, I was gonna say those of us that are human, we're all human, but those of us that really value the empathetic side of, the authentic side of humanity in business, like this is really refreshing.
Yeah. Good. Yeah. Good. I hope so.
Well, if people want to learn more about the kind of the work you do, like maybe you have a pitch, they want you to do a pitch deck for them, or they want to be understood, because everybody else they've tried in web design and marketing has not been that. How do people reach out to you?
Yeah. So one of the easiest ways is to visit clarifymymarketing.com. There's a calendar tool there where you can just click on it and schedule a time to talk. You could visit our website, which is welldressedwalrus.com, or WD Walrus on any of the social channels is where you can find me. But
perfect.
Yeah, let's just have a conversation about most people just kind of feel like, I want to do this. I want to be more relevant. I want to listen better. I want to deliver a message to my customers that, hey, I'm the one that gets it, but they're a little stuck on how do I get over the hump of the same boring marketing that I've had for years and really give people what's in my heart. I think there's a lot of people out there who it's really in their heart to do this.
Yeah.
But when they start putting paper to pen, or they start typing their next sales letter into their laptop, it just kind of it feels a little flat.
Right.
And so getting some outside perspective, which is what we do all the time, whether it's consulting or just creating a deliverable like a website, sales letter, pitch deck. Hey, we can write a pitch deck.
Right.
That, we can work with you to do that.
Love it. Really great. Awesome stuff, Kurt. Thank you so much. We'll catch you in the next episode. Until then, be well.
Thanks, Chris.